What if the past left behind questions it never meant to answer? It began with a face, not a grand monument or an engraved slab, but a small, clay face unearthed from a burial site in the Tuca Valley in 1933. The archaeologist brushed away the soil and held it in the sunlight, and for a moment, time folded strangely. The face, with its arched nose and delicately modeled lips, looked unmistakably Roman. Except this was pre-Columbian South America. The face lay nestled among gold, turquoise, copper, and jet. The surrounding graves belonged to a time just before the Americas encountered Europe. That incongruity, this uncanny Mediterranean visage among ancient American artifacts, sparked a quiet uproar. Scientists turned to testing. Thermoluminescence dated the fired clay to anywhere from the 9th century BCE to the 13th century CE, a staggering range. Some said the mineral crusts on the artifact matched the ancient burial layer, evidence it had rested there undisturbed for centuries. Others pointed to possible contamination, disturbed soils, or outright hoaxes. Perhaps the head was dropped in later, or planted during a hasty excavation. After all, digs in 1933 weren't held to the meticulous standards of today. So the debate began. Conservative scholars leaned toward accidental intrusion, an object displaced in the chaos of excavation or an artifact wrongly attributed. But a smaller, persistent group raised the harder question. Could brief, undocumented transoceanic contact have happened? Could a drifting vessel, a lost trader, or a forgotten exchange have left behind a single, haunting clue? The Roman-style face does not rewrite history. It doesn't shout its origin, it whispers. Its meaning sways with every test result, every re-examined record. Isotope analysis, chemical sourcing, context comparisons, none have settled the issue. Instead, the face remains between two possibilities. 1. A true fragment of forgotten contact. 2. A modern object that wandered where it shouldn't. Its power lies not in certainty, but in its ambiguity. And so we are left with a question rather than an answer. What do we do with evidence that fits no story? A warrior carved in stone stands alone in the New England woods. He is barely more than a silhouette, etched into a glacial boulder, sword in hand, shield by his side. To the casual eye, it looks like a knight. To the hopeful, it looks like history knocking early. Locals call him the Westford Knight. First documented in the late 1800s, the carving inspired speculation almost immediately. By the 1950s, the image had taken on a life of its own. A scholar proposed that the figure matched 14th century Scottish armor. Suddenly, the carving became more than an odd etching. It became evidence. Some believed it showed Prince Henry Sinclair's secret voyage to North America, nearly a century before Columbus. But the story is fragile. The rock weathers, cracks widen, shapes shift. What once seemed a clear sword becomes a blur of erosion. Without reliable field records, it's hard to know what the stone looked like when it was first described. Time may have helped birth the knight more than chisel or intention. In 2007, a forensic geologist studied the wear patterns. He concluded that the carving could be old, but stopped short of calling it medieval. That hesitation speaks volumes. Science must draw lines where the imagination leaps. Supporters of the knight theory point to a nearby rock etched with a single-masted ship, discovered in the 1920s. A warrior and a boat. Together, they seem to form a story. But are they truly linked? Or are we connecting dots that were never meant to be joined? Skeptics warn against pareidolia, the mind's tendency to see patterns in randomness. A crack becomes a sword. A shadow turns into a shield. Legends take root not from certainty, but from longing. There are no datable tools, no European relics, no confirmed campfires or coins. The evidence is an image and an idea. And yet, that idea persists because it's a good story. A medieval night in America stirs the imagination. It fills a silence in history with a romantic notion. But good stories aren't always true. If the Westford Night were ever to be confirmed, it would change how we think about contact between continents. But if it isn't, it still teaches something just as valuable. Our desire to find ourselves in the past often blinds us to what the past is truly saying. The question remains, how much of what we see is already shaped by what we want to find? It was 1850, and the ruins of an Assyrian palace were being cleared when someone lifted a small, polished crystal from the dust. Oval, smooth, and no larger than a pocket watch, the object seemed ordinary until it caught the light. The lens, now called the Nimrud Lens, focused sunlight to a point. When tested centuries later, it magnified small text and even ignited dry tinder under the right conditions. It was a lens. But how old was optical science? The lens's curve is deliberate. Its surface shows signs of grinding, a precision difficult to achieve without metal tools or deep understanding. Engineers today can replicate it using ancient methods, but the process requires skill, patience, and the right abrasives. Was this simply an ornament, a magnifier for craftsmen engraving gems, or part of something greater? Some proposed the lens was once part of an optical instrument, a primitive telescope. Others imagined ancient astronomers peering through it at stars. But no other pieces exist. No tubes, no mounting frames, no instructions. The safest answer is the simplest. It was a tool, something to help artisans work with fine detail, possibly ceremonial, possibly practical, but real. Still, the craftsmanship unsettles. It suggests that 2,700 years ago, someone knew how to bend light. The lens story lives not in what it proves, but in what it implies. Knowledge may rise and fall. Skills may appear, vanish, and reappear again, independently discovered or passed down through forgotten hands. Tests revealed wear patterns consistent with ancient tools, bow-driven drills, and polishing with quartz. Chemical analysis showed no metal traces, no adhesives, just stone, crafted well. There is no secret code here, no blueprint, just a quiet object with an outsized question. Did someone, long ago, use it to see what others could not? Or are we the ones trying to see too much in it? Sometimes mystery lies not in what a thing is, but in how it endured while the understanding behind it slipped quietly into history's shadows. In 1936, beneath the sands of Saqqara, Egypt, archaeologists uncovered a tomb from the First Dynasty. Among the offerings and relics, they found an object so strange it seemed almost futuristic. It was a disc, 61 centimeters across, carved from fragile metilt stone, with 3 curved lobes radiating from a central hub. It looked engineered, balanced, designed for motion. But this was 5,000 years ago. Called the Sabu Disc, the artifact sparked theories ranging from the ceremonial to the mechanical. How had ancient craftsmen drilled such a precise hole and shaped those delicate curves in a stone that fractures easily? The precision was undeniable. Copper chisels and abrasive sand were likely used, tools known from the period. But the level of control still raised eyebrows. In the tomb, the disc sat among jars, vessels, and food-related items. That context suggested a ceremonial or domestic purpose. Perhaps it was a mixing vessel, perhaps a ritual item, but others weren't so sure. Some saw in it a flywheel, a hub for machinery, a symbol of a lost science. Engineers built replicas. When spun, they stirred liquid, mimicking a primitive mixer. Others tested for wear, for signs of rotation. They found little. No burnishing around the hub, no residue to suggest repeated use. Yet the form remains compelling. Even without function, its design echoes balance and intent. A mystery of shape, not just of purpose. Modern craftspeople attempted to recreate it. The task proved difficult, but not impossible. That fact matters. It points to skill, not sorcery. Human hands, guided by knowledge now lost or repurposed, shaped this with care. Chemical tests found no adhesives, no metal traces, no machine parts buried nearby. Still, the disc shivs in the tension between practical design and symbolic meaning. Is it a relic of ritual, placed in a tomb to honor the dead, or an early exploration of mechanical thought? Like many ancient puzzles, the Sabu Disc may not have one answer. Its form inspires the imagination. Its function, if it had one, eludes us. But in the stillness of the burial chamber, it speaks of something timeless, the human impulse to shape matter with elegance, and the enduring beauty of mystery carved into stone. High on a temple lintel in Egypt, among the swirling lines of hieroglyphs, a strange shape appears. To some, it looks like a helicopter, complete with rotor blades and tail. Beside it, another form evokes a submarine. The resemblance is eerie, and that's precisely why this image went viral. Ancient flying machines, secret knowledge carved in stone. The truth is quieter. This particular temple dates to the reign of Seti around 1290 BCE. And 90 decades later, under Ramses II, many inscriptions were recarved. Names were changed, titles updated, glyphs re-engraved over older ones. The result? A visual overlap. What we see today is not a single carving, but the ghostly fusion of two sets of inscriptions. Where lines intersect, shapes emerge that were never meant to be read together. The mind, ever eager to find meaning, connects the fragments, and out pops a helicopter. This is pareidolia, the brain's talent for turning randomness into recognition. A smudge becomes a face. A silhouette becomes a machine. Egyptologists approached the claim methodically. They photographed the lintel under raking light to catch shallow cuts. They traced the overlapping hieroglyphs and compared them to known royal names. They used 3D scans to digitally peel back the layers. Each tool revealed the same truth. These were palimpsests of power, not blueprints for flight. No ancient texts mention machines, no tools, no wires, no aerodynamic components were found in the temple. There is no physical context to suggest anything beyond layered inscriptions weathered by time. Still, the image lingers in public imagination because it looks familiar, because it lets us believe in something grander, more mysterious than the dusty certainty of scholarly explanation. But sometimes, the mystery is in the misreading, and perhaps the real insight here is not about the past, but about us. How quickly we leap to conclusions, how readily we turn coincidence into proof. The stone never lied, but our minds, eager for wonder, can invent meaning faster than truth can catch up. So the question stands, when we gaze at the ancient world, are we really seeing it? Or just a reflection of our modern longing to be surprised? In the silent crypts beneath the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, Egypt, dim carvings dance along the stone walls. Among them, is one particular motif that has captivated and confounded viewers for decades. It resembles a light bulb, an elongated oval shape with a curling form inside, resting on a pillar. Some interpret the snake-like figure as a filament, the oval as a glass bulb, and the pillar as an insulator. It's uncanny in its similarity to modern electric lamps. And yet, it's not a lamp. It's a myth. Egyptologists, reading the surrounding inscriptions, explain it clearly. The image is symbolic. The oval is a lotus flower. The curling shape is a serpent, representing the divine force Haroeris. The pillar is a jed, symbolizing stability associated with Osiris. Together, they depict a creation myth, life emerging from chaos, light from darkness. The interpretation isn't guesswork. It's grounded in language, ritual, and decades of comparative studies. Epigraphers have traced every glyph, matched them to known texts, and contextualized them within broader Egyptian cosmology. Still, the resemblance to a modern bulb tempts modern eyes. People ask, where are the soot marks from torches? Why no smoke stains? But the absence of soot isn't evidence of electricity. It can just as easily be explained by good ventilation or the use of low-residue oil lamps. To test the claims, researchers searched for wires, metal traces, or signs of electric components in the temple. They found none. They examined tool marks on the carvings, consistent with traditional stonework, not technological schematics. Replicas were made. Artists recreated the image using ancient techniques. Nothing about it required knowledge of electricity, but the idea stuck. Because we want to believe, we want to imagine that ancient people touched the future, that the past held secrets we've only recently rediscovered. There's nothing wrong with curiosity, but it must be matched with rigor. The Dendera lamp isn't a window into forgotten science. It's a mirror reflecting our own hopes, our thirst for wonder. And perhaps that, too, is a kind of light. So we ask, when ancient symbols resemble our own inventions, are they predicting the future? Or are we just seeing ourselves in the stories they told? In the heart of Delhi stands a pillar of iron, over 7 meters tall, quietly defying time. For more than 1,600 years, the iron pillar of Delhi has endured sun, rain, and heat without succumbing to rust. In a world where modern metals corrode in decades, its survival is a kind of whispered marvel. Forged around the 4th century CE, the pillar is not made of stainless steel. It's not alloyed with modern treatments. Yet its surface has formed a protective layer, a thin film of iron hydrogen phosphate that shields it from decay. Scientists investigated. They discovered the iron contains an unusually high level of phosphorus. That element, reacting with air and moisture, creates a tight, adherent coating. The metal also holds slag inclusions, tiny impurities from the smelting process, that contribute to the formation of this protective skin. It wasn't just the ingredients, it was also the method. The pillar was built by forge welding individual pieces of iron. That technique, combined with local environmental conditions, cycles of wet and dry, helped the protective layer grow slowly and consistently. The film doesn't flake like ordinary rust. It stays put. Could ancient smiths have known this? Did they choose their materials and methods to resist corrosion? Or was this resilience a fortunate accident, an emergent property of trial, error, and centuries of craft? That's the deeper mystery. Historians debate intent. Some point to ancient texts that suggest metallurgists understood the behavior of certain ores. Others caution that no direct record proves deliberate anti-corrosion design. To test these ideas, Modern teams tried reproducing the effect. Using high phosphorus iron and similar techniques, some succeeded in mimicking the protective layer, but others failed, especially when using modern materials with low phosphorus or different heating methods. The lesson is humbling. What we often call lost technology might simply be lost context. Ancient makers may not have known the chemistry, but they knew what worked. Through patient practice, they stumbled into solutions that endure. The pillar does not hide secrets. It reveals craft. It shows how precision can emerge from practice, how endurance can be shaped without knowing the full why. And in doing so, it asks us something simple and profound. How much of our own progress rests not on genius, but on the careful hands of those who came before, working without fame, building what lasts. In the arid hills of Peru, strange stones began to surface, smooth, dark ovals etched with images that seemed to defy time. Dinosaurs, flying machines, advanced surgeries, human figures standing beside long-extinct beasts or operating strange devices. By the 1960s, a local physician named Dr. Javier Cabrera had collected thousands of these so-called Ica Stones, convinced they held the key to a lost civilization. The images were vivid, the implications dramatic. If real, these stones would rewrite history. They would prove that ancient people had knowledge far beyond what mainstream science accepted. Some saw them as evidence of ancient astronauts, others of pre-flood knowledge or even forgotten human epochs. But the story unraveled, not with silence, but confession. In the 1970s, local artisans came forward. They had made many of the stones, they said, using dentist drills, simple chisels, and household chemicals. They carved the designs, baked the stones in dung to fake age, and sold them to tourists eager for mystery. Microscopic analysis backed their claims. Fresh tool marks lay beneath the patina. The coating itself could be replicated easily. More telling, few, if any, of the stones came from secure archaeological sites. They lacked provenance. They came from market stalls, not sealed layers of ancient soil. Still, the myth persisted. The images were too striking to forget. They circulated in pseudo-scientific books, on television, in museum exhibits curated not for accuracy, but for spectacle. The stones became cultural artifacts of belief, symbols of a longing for a different story. Mainstream scientists offered a clear response. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Without context, without excavation records, radiocarbon dates, or peer-reviewed findings, the stones were stories, not facts. They became a cautionary tale of how mystery sells, of how desire can sculpt history more powerfully than chisels, of how a single image, once loosed into the world, can be hard to unsee, even when it's proven false. And perhaps most importantly, the Ica Stones remind us of something fragile and human: our need to believe in hidden truths, our hunger for wonder, and the thin line between curiosity and deception. In the end, the stones don't tell us about lost civilizations. They tell us about ourselves. What are we really searching for when we hope that history is hiding something just for us? In 1912, in a gravel pit in Piltdown, England, a labourer struck something hard: bone. The fragments were delivered to Charles Dawson, an amateur antiquarian. Soon, more pieces followed: part of a skull, a jawbone, and some teeth. They were unlike anything seen before. The brain case was large, human, but the jaw, primitive, ape-like. It was, some said, the missing link. The discovery electrified the scientific world. It seemed to place human evolution firmly in Europe, confirming long-held beliefs of British prominence in the dawn of man. Museums displayed reconstructions. Textbooks rewrote timelines. Skeptics were drowned in applause, but beneath the excitement, cracks formed. Over decades, new fossils surfaced, in Africa, in Asia, that didn't fit the Piltdown model. They showed smaller brains, more primitive features, yet were clearly older. Still, Piltdown held sway. Its prestige distorted the lens of science. Until 1953. That year, 3 researchers, Kenneth Oakley, Joseph Weiner, and Wilfrid LeGros Clark, reopened the case with better tools and sharper questions. They used fluorine testing, which measures how long bones have been in the ground. The skull and jaw absorbed different amounts. They hadn't aged together. Then came microscopy. They found file marks on the teeth, artificial shaping. Chemical analysis revealed the skull had been stained to look older. The jaw belonged to an orangutan. The skull, a modern human. It was a hoax, deliberate, elaborate, effective, and it had fooled the world for 40 years. Piltdown's collapse was a turning point. It changed paleoanthropology, but not just because of what it revealed, because of what it corrected. Afterward, scientific standards tightened. Provenance mattered more. Peer review became stricter. Replication and skepticism found new value, but Piltdown also taught a deeper, harder truth. Science is human. It is shaped by biases, pride, and the cultural winds of its time. The desire for a certain narrative, of Europe's central role, of intellectual evolution mirroring colonial identity, had made the fraud easier to believe. The bones were fake, but the belief was real. And that belief, more than the skull itself, shaped generations of thought. So the lesson endures. Skepticism is not cynicism. It is the discipline that guards against hope's blind spots. And the question lingers, how often do we see what we want to believe, not what the evidence truly shows? In the dusty tomb of Padimen in Saqqara, Egypt, a curious object was discovered at the end of the 19th century. Carved from sycamore wood, just 18 centimeters wide, it resembled something strangely modern, a glider, its wings curved upward, its body sleek, its tail vertical. The Saqqara Bird, as it came to be known, looked uncannily like a model airplane. Was this ancient aviation? Mainstream archaeologists were cautious. Birds, especially falcons, were sacred in Egyptian iconography. Horus, the falcon-headed god, was ever present in funerary art. Wooden bird figurines were common, often symbolic, sometimes toys. In this context, the object could be nothing more than ritual or play. But the shape stirred curiosity. Engineers and aviation enthusiasts asked, could it actually fly? In 2002, a craftsman created a balsa wood replica. It glided, but poorly, unstable, unpredictable. In 2006, a scaled model underwent wind tunnel testing. With minor adjustments, including a horizontal tailplane, it generated significant lift. Then, in 2023, advanced 3D scans and fluid dynamics simulations suggested it lacked the necessary stability for controlled flight. Its center of mass was too far back. It could lift, but not glide with purpose. So what was it? Perhaps a toy, made with love and imagination. Perhaps a symbol of gods, of rebirth, of flight in the spiritual sense. Or maybe an experiment in wood and air by an ancient mind, exploring form without knowing function. No other parts were found. No hangers, no drawings, no aerodynamic doctrine, just a single, intriguing object buried with care. The temptation to believe it really flew, is strong. But the evidence does not support aviation. It supports wonder, because here lies the deeper truth. Even without engines, ancient people dreamed of flight. They watched birds soar, and they carved their longing into wood. They imagined motion. They gave form to aspiration. The Saqqara Bird may never have left the ground, but it still carries something across time, a fragment of the universal human desire to rise, to escape the pull of Earth, to become light in the air. And it asks us quietly, is it the wings themselves that matter, or the impulse to build them? Beneath the sands of Turkey's ancient ruins, a disk of polished rock waited for centuries to catch the light of another age. Discovered in the ruins of Nimrud in 1850, this unassuming artifact, barely the size of a child's palm, seemed to carry no secrets at first glance, but its shape and surface told a different story. Carefully ground from rock crystal, the Nimrud lens is curved just enough to focus light. Hold it above fine writing or detail work, and it magnifies. Place it in bright sun, and it can ignite dry tinder. It works. But why was it made? Theories abound. Perhaps it was a simple magnifier used by craftsmen for engraving or embroidery. Others suggest it was a decorative inlay meant to shimmer in the light. The most ambitious theory? That it was part of an ancient optical device, an early lens in a telescope built long before Galileo. Tests revealed that its curvature allows for basic magnification. Replicas confirmed its potential for fire starting and detail enhancement. But the quality of the optics is limited. The field is narrow, the edges distort, and crucially, no other optical parts have been found. No tubes, no mounts, no manuals or matching components from the same period. The lack of context keeps the telescope theory in the realm of speculation. Yet the lens remains a testament to skill. Its surface shows signs of abrasion with fine grit, likely shaped with copper tools and quartz sand. This wasn't an accidental form. It was made with intent and precision. So perhaps the question is not whether it was used to gaze at stars, but what kind of knowledge it represents. Technological advancement isn't always linear. Skills rise and vanish. Knowledge can flicker and fade, carried only in objects whose uses we no longer fully grasp. The Nimrud lens challenges the idea that the ancients were always behind us. Instead, it invites us to reconsider. What if they simply followed different paths? What if some forms of insight burned brightly for a moment and were lost, waiting to be rediscovered in glass and stone? And in that quiet curve of crystal, what else might still be waiting to come into focus? Carved deep into the bedrock of history, the story of the Saqqara Bird isn't the only time symbolism has blurred with speculation. Consider the Sabu Disc, the Dendera lamp, and the so-called helicopter hieroglyph. Each emerged from Egypt's depths, each sparked theories of forgotten science. But these were solitary objects, or illusions, never supported by a full set of tools, records, or context. Now shift focus to another mystery that endures not for what it reveals, but for what it resists. A weathered carving, a sword in stone, a single magnifying lens. All these are threads in a strange tapestry, one that stretches across continents and millennia. But not all puzzles are ancient. Sometimes the artifacts arrive modern, yet still aim to reshape the past. Take the Ica Stones. Unlike the buried relics of Saqqara or Nimrud, these surfaced in Peru during the 20th century. Thousands of smooth black rocks, etched with scenes of humans riding dinosaurs, performing complex surgeries, or flying fantastical machines. Dr. Javier Cabrera amassed them, believing he held proof of a vanished civilization, one with technology predating recorded history. The images were surreal, provocative, unforgettable. But then came the confessions. Local artisans explained how they'd carved the stones using dentist drills and chemical tricks to simulate age. They sold them to tourists and collectors eager for mystery. Microscopes revealed modern tool marks. Many stones had no archaeological context, no burial layers, no datable surroundings. They were, almost certainly, forgeries. And yet, the allure endured. Even proven falsehoods find believers. The Ica Stones became icons of alternative history, used to bolster fringe theories from creationist claims to tales of ancient aliens. Because sometimes belief lingers longer than fact. Even today, replicas circulate. Museums, some legitimate, some not, display them. They've become artifacts of cultural desire more than history. What do they tell us? Not about dinosaurs or vanished empires, but about the modern mind, about the yearning to find hidden truths, to rewrite the story we've been told, about how easy it is to mistake fascination for evidence. The Ica Stones are mirrors, not windows. They show how we see ourselves in the stories we wish were true. And so they ask us, in our search for lost wisdom, are we looking for the truth or just a better version of the past to believe in? Among the countless relics catalogued in dusty archives and sealed tombs, one object stands out not for its mystery, but for its implications. Unearthed in 1933 in the Tuca Valley, a tiny clay head sparked a question that still reverberates. It looked Roman, but it wasn't found in Rome. It lay beneath the soil of pre-Columbian South America. The face, a quiet fragment, echoed classical busts. The lips, the nose, the expression. It clashed with everything archaeologists expected to find in that burial layer. Tests were inconclusive. Thermoluminescence dating offered a wide range, anywhere from the 9th century BCE to the 13th century CE. Soil minerals matched the surrounding layer, suggesting authenticity. But critics pushed back. Could the object have been introduced later? Could excavation errors, or hoaxes, explain its presence? And still, the object resists conclusion. It sits in the space between two worlds, the established history of isolation and the whispered possibility of forgotten contact. No ships, no settlements, no texts support the idea of transoceanic exchange in that period. Yet, here is this face, alone, uncertain. The scholarly response is cautious. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. One object does not a new history make, but in every corner of the world, similar anomalies surface. A disc that stirs like a machine, a lens that magnifies like a tool, carvings that look modern but date ancient, stones that whisper fictions, crafted by modern hands but believed as ancient truths. Each artifact challenges the same thing, the linearity of time, the assumption that the past was simple, unknowing, awaiting us to awaken it. What if it wasn't? What if knowledge blooms and fades like light on water, scattered, rediscovered, sometimes mistaken, sometimes misunderstood? These artifacts may not rewrite history, but they complicate it. They remind us that the past is not a single voice, but a chorus, and some voices are soft, barely heard, beneath layers of sand and skepticism. So the Roman head, like many others, remains suspended. Not evidence, not fraud, just possibility. And it leaves us with a final, unsettling question. Is our greatest blind spot the evidence we choose to ignore? History is not a straight road. It is a spiral, winding, folding back on itself, full of echoes and unfinished thoughts. From a carved lens in Nimrud to a wooden bird in Saqqara, from iron that refuses to rust to stones etched with impossible scenes. These artifacts hold a strange power, not because they change everything we know, but because they reveal how much we don't. Each object we followed, whether hoax, misunderstanding, or genuine enigma, illuminates something deeper than its material form. They remind us that the past is a mirror with cracks, not a window with clarity. Some were carved in faith. Some were forged in deceit. Others remain suspended between truth and tale. But all of them ask the same question. What do we want history to be? Do we seek evidence or affirmation? Mystery or meaning? The Piltdown skull showed how belief can blind us. The Ica Stones revealed how myth can outlive fact. The Saqqara Bird whispered of dreams that outpaced technology. And the iron pillar, standing silent, told of craft mistaken for magic. Science advances by questioning, but wonder begins with doubt. These objects live at that crossroads, where curiosity meets humility. They do not prove ancient astronauts or forgotten empires. They prove that humanity has always searched for power, for beauty, for meaning. And sometimes that search leaves behind an object, not to explain, but to endure. So we gather these fragments, not as trophies, but as reminders. That knowledge is fragile, that truth takes time, that even a single artifact, out of place, can ripple through what we think we understand. In the end, the value of these mysteries lies not in whether they shatter history, but in how they open us to deeper questions. Not, did this really happen, but what else might be true? What else have we missed? And perhaps most importantly, how do we remain open to wonder, even when answers never come?